trash cleanup and the runners. Okay, today I have the pleasure of announcing a young gentleman from the area who is going to enlighten our brains and day with his knowledge on farming. Please join me in welcoming our very own Darrell.
Thank you, Dee. When I was trying to get ready for this, I was trying to think what might be an appropriate title. And everybody's enjoying inflation, I'm sure. I'm not sure enjoying is the word, but how many of you remember inflation back in the 80s? It was pretty tough. Well, it's tough again today. In fact, it's probably worse today in many respects when you look at it. And since I deal predominantly in agriculture, it's had some tremendous impact on the farming community. One of the things that came out of the 80s in agriculture was bankruptcies on farm operations. My honest opinion is that will probably happen again. Size is an important factor in agriculture, just like it is in any business. And of course, efficiencies are also extremely important. And so I'll share some financial information from one of the last operations I worked with. It's a small operation, it's not a big operation. And I'll be honest about it, its future, if it wasn't where it's at in its life cycle, I would seriously doubt whether it would exist within the next 10 to 15 years. It really needs to grow, acreage loans. One of the big, excuse me, as I stated, efficiencies are extremely important. And our food supply, which all of us value highly, is pretty tight, to be quite honest about it. And when you look at what's going on weather-wise and worldwide, from the standpoint of what's going on in the Ukraine, lots of crop production in the Ukraine was taken over by Russia when they invaded. So we have a huge supply that never even got into the food chain. What you have is the Ukrainians, along with Russia, are the two top producers of corn and wheat. And so there's right away when it happened, excuse me. Right away when it happened, what you had is that, for example, Egypt said, oh, we're not going to export any wheat. So in other countries who had commodities that they felt were important to them and their people, all at once they said, well, we're not going to export any of this particular commodity. So all at once, all these things started contributing to the inflationary things that we're experiencing. Basically, what we have is that Russia, as I said, took over a large amount of the 21 production from the Ukraine. Currently, the UN and Turkey are working with Russia, and it sounds like they might be close to getting an agreement where they're going to be opening up and letting export of grain from the Ukraine come about. So hopefully that would help lower some of the inflationary issues on the food side. As I mentioned, the bankruptcies, interest rates are going up, and of course that too has an important part within agriculture, because the capitalization is there, but a lot of it's borrowed money. And so if a farm operation is in good financial overall position, that's great. But guess what? The last few years, low interest rates have been a blessing to lots of operations. The primary costs in agriculture today are basically fertilizers, fuel, chemicals, repairs, machinery, and equipment. Those are big ticket items and have gone up substantially. Farmers have been fortunate that commodity prices this past year also rose substantially. Just to give you a little idea of what happened in the last 2 years, just with fertilizer alone, basically anhydrous ammonia went up 2.2 times. It went up from $500 a ton to $1,600 a ton roughly. Phosphorus went up from $400 a ton to $1,500 a ton. I have to read my own right. And potash went up from $300 to $860 a ton over the last 2 years. So those are critical items to agriculture. It's not only the repair costs have gone up, but also what we found is that supply for certain repairs are really an issue. Another thing is if you want to buy a piece of equipment, finding that piece of equipment, it may be used, brand new. If it's a big ticket item, you're going to have to order it. Most dealers and most manufacturers do not have a large supply of big ticket machinery equipment. Mainly combines, sprayers, tractors. Those are the big items that agriculture puts lots of dollars into. As far as commodities go, if you look at the piece of paper you have at the very bottom of it, yesterday's grain prices here in Madison County, if you sold to M&M, which is FS, basically what you had is that corn was $6.66 a bushel, soybeans were $15.09 a bushel, and wheat was $7.77 a bushel. Now, if you look at what the estimated 2022 costs for each one of those items, and you'll start to see that, and this is an average median, I shouldn't say that. This is a median. $4.57 a bushel for corn, $11.31 a bushel. For soybeans and wheat, $7.86. If you look at, and I realize this is kind of apples and oranges because we're talking about last year's crop and this year's cost. But just to look at it, basically what you're looking at is $2.09 a profit for each bushel of corn, $3.78 on soybeans, and a loss of 9 cents a bushel for wheat. So in Illinois, it's not a big wheat producer compared to other areas. Other than that, just to give you a little financial information, this is not a large farm operation. We pick up the sheep. Basically, what I did is copied a couple of reports that you might be interested in. But if you look at the left-hand side of that top report, you can see there was $69 available cash flow wise. And $1,161,000 of that came from crop sales. This is a crop operation. Down below, you can see that the costs were $935,000, and the other items they spent money on and so forth. So actually, they had an increase of cash of $161,000. That's a pretty good year. However, it's going to have to get better. They don't have lots of debt. If you look at the right-hand side, it just basically says the same thing in a little different. It talks about the profit. It was $228,000 of profit, cash profit. There was some capital items acquired and sold, and there were a few dollars paid in income tax. And you may wonder why, how does he get by with $500 of income tax? I sure would love to do that on that kind of revenue, right? Well, we had about $79,000 loss carried forward. We used all that loss up from previous years. And then we also wound up using some 179 direct expense from the machinery equipment that was purchased. And we also had $10,000 of cash carryover from the previous year income tax. So they definitely paid more than $500. It's just $500 of cash paid out this past year. As I said, this is a relatively small operation. It's 1,212 acres. You go down to the bottom, middle, I guess I should say. And what you'll see there is the total expenses, estimated depreciation, and in this case it was the actual depreciation. Capital, income tax, and a break even, $1,025,000. So overall, they have an excellent year last year. They had the best crops they've ever grown. That's a real plus. Plus, they had a substantial increase in the price of the commodities which they sold. So this was kind of like a banner year, I guess you could say, for them. They're in excellent financial position. And agriculture generally is an excellent financial position. If you look at the age of farm operators, now I'm talking about the farmers themselves. If you look at where they're at in their working capital positions, what you'll find is, and it's only natural, the farmers that are 60, 55, 60, that age group and above, generally, if they're still in business, because guess what, there is shakeout all the way along the line. And so from the standpoint of those farmers, they're in pretty good financial position. Just to give you an idea, this is a corporation that I'm showing you, small corporation. There's no farmland debt in the corporation. The cash rent every acre. The individuals within the corporation own about 400 of the acres that you see there. They only have about $150,000 of debt on the real estate. And that interest rate is locked in. The thing that created the problems back in the 80s when inflation hit was that interest rates didn't stop when they got to 6, 7, 8. They went to 18% and so on and so forth. So what you had is you didn't have profitability like we have today in most cases within agriculture. And not having that profitability, historically, farmers had fixed interest rates on their farm loan. And what they would do is, well, I need this or I need that. So they would refinance their real estate to get the necessary cash flow. I think that's it. To buy machinery equipment, okay? Then what we incurred was this high interest rate, and things changed in the lending world, and we went from fixed rate interest to variable rate interest. And all at once, these people who were pretty good farmers, and if you looked at their operation, you thought, man, they've got all kinds of money. Well, all at once, interest rates, because they had lost their fixed rate, now all at once, we have variable rates. And as a result, substantial number of farmers had to file for bankruptcy. Now, I'm pleased to say, I worked a few of those. And why I'm pleased to say, every one of them wanted to retire. They were able to continue to farm. I can tell you some real horror stories when it comes to bankruptcies. I can also tell you some really great tales as well. So, where are we going? That's a good question. Where this stops, you know, just like God only knows. So, as far as the overall situation, I just hope interest rates don't continue to escalate. I know they have to go up. And also costs will probably continue. So, other than that, that's about to, you can call it the good news, bad news, or whatever you want to call it. But I would say that food costs will probably, well, in fact, they kind of level off. But we'll see what kind of crops we wind up with this year. If all the drought we're talking about, different areas, and we've been pretty fortunate. We got a crop in late, however, guess what? We need rain, but we so far have gotten enough in most instances. So what we wind up producing is going to play a big role in what really food costs will be next year. So with that, any questions? Yeah.
You opened the door when you said, where's this all going? Fertilizer prices, you talked about the increases 2 to 4 times where they were a year ago. Who produces the majority of the fertilizer? I think I know that answer, but I'd like to know more.
Russia basically is a big producer.
And so what is, if that war doesn't stop, then they continue to control those fertilizer prices, right?
Correct. Because we have not, whether I like it or not, we have given away the production side that we have. The availability of producing, that's gone overseas, like so many other things. And so, nitrogen's the big issue, really. Anhydrous ammonia, nitrogen. Basically, other commodities or other fertilizers, if we can get them on board. Canada is a big source of both phosphate and potash. So it isn't as though it's not around, but it just takes a while to get back into being produced so the farmer gets available to the farmer. Yes.
Do you think in the near future we'll start seeing more genetically modified food due to the interest rates, the fertilizer prices issue?
Just about everything he gets genetically modified to a degree. Just to give you an example, corn's the big issue. Like there's corn that cannot prove the food chain. It's prohibited from going. It's good in feed the livestock, but not to individual food chain. for our consumption. So will that continue? Why, yeah, it's going to continue. Our production today, just to give you the example, you know, when I was growing up, you planted corn about 18,000 kernels per acre. Today, you plant the 28, 32,000 per acre. And they modify that corn so that it all grows in the ear about that long and so they go around. And it's 1 ear per stalk. Years ago, you might get 2 ears per stalk, but they might be that long. Or 1 ear and it's that long. So it's the same way with soybeans and other commodities. Yes.
Necessarily a bad thing.
No, this is genetic modification. It's not the kind of thing where they're injecting something into that kernel of corn or, you know, soybean. But that's not true of all corn. That's why, yeah, corn, yes, it has to be separated. And it's goes into the livestock. Not our huge.
I know I have a couple more questions for Darrell, but Sarah is waiting in Honduras. So we will get right back to that.
Sure. Thank you.
No, no. I don't
Get off that.
Sarah, can you show me? Sarah, can you show your video? I think there's a problem with the service in Honduras. Imagine. Well, in the meantime, I would like to know how you got the farm management.
That's a good question.
Thank you.
I was born and raised in town, in fact, here in Edwardsville. However, back in the 50s, the Korean War broke out, and my uncle had a nice dairy operation over Effingham County. And he needed help, so guess what? I wound up working over there, getting involved in agriculture. It sparked my interest. So I graduated with a degree in ag economics from Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. And then from there, I wound up selling livestock at the National City Stockyards, and some of you might remember down here next to St. Louis. And then from there, I managed a large hog operation in Pittsfield, Illinois. And then I got into agricultural lending. And then from there, I got into farm management and records and that kind of stuff. In fact, I helped them bring to the largest computerized ag accounting systems in the States back in the 60s and the 70s. So that's kind of how I involved with this. Go to work and started my own business in 19. Yeah,
How many did you manage? Ish.
farms. Well, I still manage 2, but I did, I don't know how many farms for the Bank of Edwardsville Trust Department. But that's,
So that's how you got your clients that Bank of Edwardsville would say.
no, my client, I never got a client out of the Bank of Edwardsville. I never tried it, to be honest. No, my clients were, I had clients in Richmond, Virginia, Guernsey, Wyoming. Lots of them, and don't ask me why, but lots of them paralleled up and down the Mississippi River on both sides. I have no idea why that happened, but that's what it is.
Other questions?
I have another one, so what are your thoughts? So last night, Larry Fink, who is the CEO of BlackRock, one of the largest asset managers in the world, commented that he was more concerned about food than fuel in the next decade. Your thoughts, anything that you know about that?
Well, populations continue to grow, and we're blessed. We don't realize how much we're blessed. If you haven't been to a third world country, you haven't really experienced what poverty is. As we look at our carryovers, in other words, production, there's one thing, the light is the continuing development of food product, production of that food product, whether it be corn, soybeans, what. You know, the last 4 years, when I say we, like here in Illinois has grown every year the previous year's production. Okay? Now, that's one unusual. Is it sustainable? I doubt it, you know, in that manner. But yet at the same time, our population worldwide continues to grow. And so it's a combination of what are we really able to do. And for example, you know, we use ethanol. Well, where does the ethanol come from? The vast majority of ethanol comes from corn, production of corn. So, you know, there's all kinds of things that enter into this. So if we go to electricity, do we need ethanol? There's more of that going to go, you know, in the food production and other products as well, which are used in the creation of ethanol. So yeah, I'd say it's definitely a concern. Would I be overly concerned about it? As long as we're able to maintain average or better production, I'm not too concerned about it. But if we have some real bad years, not just here in the United States, but Brazil, for example, you know, they produce 2 crops a year, where we produce 1. So, you know, one of the concerns, whether we like it or not, needs to be that Brazil, China is really courting Brazil. They're putting lots of effort into Brazil and other countries as well. So, you know, it's hard to say. You know, concern, yeah, I can understand concern. Can we meet the challenge if we don't have worldwide drought or huge droughts in high production areas? Last year, Brazil really got clobbered. Like I said, they only produced 2 crops a year. Their last crop was not very good at all. And those are the kinds of things that reduce what we call the carryover from 1 year's production. At the end of that year, we get the new crop. Where do we keep going, and what's that carryover look like in relationship to the world population? That's the indicator.
Darrell, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
On behalf of home nursery. Speaking of third world countries, I think Sarah is back, but we will go ahead with the